All right, greetings from the Dark Continent, Conscious Caracal here, or Adams Van Sale, and tonight we're going to be shining a light not on events down here on the Dark Continent, but rather on a subject, on a specific topic. And this is a topic that we have touched on this channel, and you will be recognizing my guest tonight as well, friend of the show, Mr. Odin Moja, resident computer scientist of South African Twitter, and he also did his master's thesis in artificial intelligence. So we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, but also just about technology in general, tech utopianism and tech pessimism, and see where what the future might hold. Because my guest tonight, if you've listened to his previous episodes on the channel, you'll know he's more of a technological optimist in regards to the future, but we're going to get into the nuances of that. It isn't just all sunshine and roses and embrace technology at every opportunity. So welcome on back on the show or on the channel, Odin.
Good to be back, my guy. How's it going?
All right. No, it's going well, man. It's just you're sitting there, you're our Florida correspondent, as your
Florida.
as your background shows. But
Yeah,
it's incredible that technology makes it possible that we can have this conversation.
yeah. That's a good segue into some of the upsides of technology. Yeah.
Right.
It's actually, what is it? It's 1 o'clock here. So yeah, we haven't moved into daylight savings time. No, we moved out in the spring. I'm still not used to that. Anyway, yeah. Let's get right into it, mate.
Right. So I think firstly, I just want to remind everyone that's tuning in, if you have any questions regarding tonight's topic or any questions regarding specifically artificial intelligence, put them in the chat and we will definitely get to them. Kerma GTT says, nice flag there on the left.
I think he's talking about my Gaston flag. Shout out to the Florida State College Libertarians.
Right.
It's my favorite club.
All right. So let's get into the topic of tonight, and that is not techno-optimism, rather tempered techno-optimism. So, Odin, let's start off, I think, on a more specific note, and that is actually one of your intellectual influences, and that is Isaac Arthur. Can you maybe elaborate on why he's one of the thinkers that has enlightened you on your thoughts on technology?
I mean, he's also a techno-optimist like myself. He's the reason I became a techno-optimist. He's also probably the only reason I have anything good to say about the entire state of Ohio, which I hate with a burning passion. But aside from that, he is a guy, just a broad background. He's a guy who served his time, like many other men in this country, in the U.S. military, in, I believe it's artillery or armor. But his actual love were the fields of physics and computer science. And I don't know how I found his first video, but somehow I just found his video, one of his videos one day, and I just kept watching. And what I really liked about him is that he puts a very realistic spin on how bad things can get. He sort of often, when he approaches topics like like I said, obviously AI, because that's his field, like mine. And also when he approaches things like terraforming planets or the power output of a star, how realistic is it? If we could do X, Y, and Z? He says, yes, I understand that people are afraid because of all these years of, hyperbole in the media, but here are the facts of how bad it can get, and here is why I think it is a good thing in general. And that's sort of because I think a lot of techno-optimists don't take into account that, yes, a lot of people out there have been conditioned through years and generations of media hyperbole that this technological waterfall we're about to go over is just pure bad. And there is a seed of truth to that, but I think, as with all forms of art, that seed of truth is kind of just being expunged on way too much. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, when you were talking about that existential threat, now when we were chatting on the No Script podcast, you actually made a very interesting remark there. You observed that the majority of scientific fields today are actually we are living in a time where the majority of scientific fields are dealing with existential threats. Can you elaborate on that as you elaborated on that episode?
Cool. So my comment was because we were sort of discussing around the issue of how far can we go, how far should we go, and that sort of thing. And it wasn't to just say, and I guess you inferred that it wasn't meant in the sense that, oh, we should, well, there's no point, we should just keep going anyway because everything's dangerous. It's sort of a very stare it in the face reality type thing that, yes, in terms of the levels at which societies advance, when you become a 0.5 Kardashev civilization, I think we're like 0.7 or 0.8. When you become okay, background. When we talk about Kardashev civilizations, it was a scale. It's a very general, flawed scale, but a good scale. A scale which a lot of scientists use to measure how advanced a civilization is. And there's three basic stages. There is stage one, which is you harness all the power output of your local star. Stage two, I believe, is your whole system. And stage three is pretty much the whole power output of your entire galaxy, basically. That's all your local group of galaxies, very closely knit group of galaxies, and that's the thing. Now, there's a lot of flaws in the Kardashev scale, but it's general thing. So, as humans, we were becoming a civilization that gets to a point where our sciences are so advanced that pretty much everything we do in every direction gets to the point, or is getting to the point, where it is an existential threat. Quantum computing, artificial intelligence, in biosciences, technologies like CRISPR, where you can directly cut specific gene sequences and sequence them and things. And it is a necessary thing. It's like,
I think the only example you named was metallurgy of an example.
Yeah, I think no shade to people in metallurgy. I think like a bunch of structural engineers are going to be like in my mentions. You're like, this guy, I'm going to walk on campus, walk past the metallurgy buildings, mean mugging guys. It's kind of, so if I had to abstract it away from pure science, think about it this way. Everything a Formula One team does is expensive. Like a little screw bolt in the car, it's super expensive because it's made by this thing. It's the same concept here. Because they're at that level, because we're getting to that level, everything we do becomes super expensive or super dangerous. But at the same time, that's part of the reason for my techno-optimism, because it means we have now reached the big leagues, guys. We have now gotten that far. And as far as we can tell, we're the only ones who've gotten that far. So yes, it's daunting. It's like the stage fright you get when you're about to play the world's biggest concert, but you're about to play the world's biggest concert.
Yeah, and that's the thing when it comes to existential threats in all these different fields, as you correctly mentioned. I mean, we've got some very scary stuff going on in regards to gene editing. We've got chemical warfare and chemical weaponry, world-ending nuclear warfare technology, all these different fields where, and that's not even talking about virology as well, where we where we might have had a taste of the how existentially dangerous that type of science can be. But when it comes to these types of risks, and this is where I want to zero in more specifically the conversation, you can get to a point where you start thinking, well, we've gotten to a good point now technologically, we can just draw the line now and we can stop. But then something comes up. The problem with that is, then that doesn't mean that line is drawn in the sand for every other community in the world, or every other nation, or every other civilization. There are going to be other civilizations and other nations that are going to continue advancing their technology. They're going to continue with the technological arms race, and you're going to be sitting there where you've stopped at a certain point. At some point, their technology is going to become so advanced that they can just take you over in a matter of hours or minutes even. So what is your answer to that? I mean, let's be realistic in regards to being pessimistic or optimistic about technology. There does seem, as I see it, to be a little bit of an inevitable nature to technological progress, where there will always be forces pushing for the advancement of technology, and you're not going to be able to stop them on a global level. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean it's a bit of game theory at play there. Is that I'm personally a big fan of what I'd call the tempered full bore approach. Is that okay? A great example is the American Constitution in its purest form. It actually gives the people a great amount of uh, freedom and a great amount of self determination. But what's often overlooked in the Constitution of the United States is that the founding fathers said this is a great constitution. It's an immense amount of freedom, but it is only going to be functional in the hands of a good religious and moral people. And to abstract that to technological advancement, I would say to the same extent, maybe the question isn't so much is it bad or is it inevitable that we keep advancing. Maybe the question we should be asking is how can we accelerate our sort of societal values or preserve the good of our societal values so that that advancement is tempered by our societal values. That's the question I think we should be asking.
Because I saw here Years made a similar comment when they said, I like technology, but only if it is used morally and responsibly. And I think that relates to what you're saying there, where our morality and our values need to form the limits of this technology, and that pretty much tempers our advancement of it. If that's how I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, our advancement in our application of that technology, because yeah, I mean, there are a lot of technologies out there that can be used right now in very wonderful ways and in some very, very morally objectionable ways. And so again, I think my answer would be, I think we need to look at tempering our social values more than we need to worry about the advancement, because yeah, for a certain extent, it is kind of inevitable, the advance.
Yeah, because we're in the end going to be the creators and the developers of that technology. So our moral values and our worldview and perceptions are naturally going to be interwoven into how the fate of that technology. I think we're far away from technology that develops itself. I think we're at a point still where the vast majority of technology is developed and created by humans, and that means that our morals and our worldviews and our values still shape that technology in regards to how threatening it is to us and how it serves humanity and how it serves communities.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
So I see a question here in the chat from Sideliner Opinions who says, but why spend all your money going to Mars while some of your people are starving in your own backyard? I mean, that's one of the big technological conundrums. I think that's not only been a conundrum of our time, but that's been a conundrum throughout history.
And it's
that duality between advancement and also firstly helping your fellow man around you with that resource.
and it's one of my favorite questions to answer. Thank you, Sideliner, by the way. He was in my video from earlier today. So the easiest, I guess, to a certain way, sort of flippant answer is because we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We really can. A large amount of things like starvation and economic problems aren't because we can't produce enough. In fact, by actual scientific calculations, the Earth can easily support a human population of trillions. And I do mean trillions of human beings. A lot of the starving and the want that we see in the world are just sort of logistic systems that are not optimized, either accidentally or intentionally, but logistic systems that are not optimized. But on top of that, let's say that it wasn't largely because of logistics systems. I find the idea that we can't go further until we have utopia for everyone, kind of not logically consistent. I mean, I imagine me not being allowed to advance in school because I haven't gotten 100% for every subject. It doesn't track for me. So while yes, we should pay attention to our problems at home, I think that we should also realize we can walk in. And moreover than that, beyond that, that question ignores the fact that advancing in some directions actually provides solutions for others. Kind of a weird example, but much of the plastic surgery, whether it be elective or whether it be elective or just sort of actually needed, or things like radar and plastic surgery, much of that was born through advancement, through military advancements and through exploratory advancements, medical techniques and all that. By advancing there, now, if we had just said, no, we're not going to advance any further because these people can't get this medical surgery, there's an argument to be made that if we didn't advance there, we wouldn't have found the answer through our advancement in certain sort of exploratory and military things. And I guess the last thing I'll say on that is I think that's sort of a Musk reference. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm always up for human beings being on other planets because, this is a single point of failure for the whole of humanity. So I'll give him points there. But in terms of actual exploration, I would say that going to other planets is a sucker's bet, because going to a planet means that you are escaping one gravity well to put yourself on another gravity well. Gravity well is something we say, large planetoids, things that have their own gravity fields. You're expending all this energy to leave this gravity well and then put yourself on another one. It would be far more feasible and efficient to build what we call O'Neill cylinders in space, in orbit of Earth and the Moon, than it would be to expend all this effort to get over to Mars. So maybe let's pursue both routes in terms of human exploration. Anyway, yeah.
Now, in regards to, now that we've gotten to the I wouldn't say a critique, but rather a response to techno-pessimism or techno-skepticism. What would your critiques be of the techno-utopians, the people that are the absolute techno-optimists in every regard, say full steam ahead, don't even disable the brakes. We just need to go as far and as fast as possible into the future in regards to technological advancement. What would your thoughts on that be?
Okay, so first of all, when you say techno-utopians, I'm going to assume you mean true utopians, as in post-scarcity civilization. Let's say for some reason we have super advanced automation, or we've found a way to break the laws of thermodynamics, which is the ultimate free lunch, because then you can just reverse entropy and do all sorts of magic stuff. I'm assuming you mean that, and not post-discontent civilizations, which is a utopia you reach whereby either you put a chip in everyone's brain, or you drug them, or some combination of those things, or you genetically engineer them such that they're essentially living in a open sewer pipe, but they're totally happy. To them, that's utopia. I'm assuming that's not what you mean. I'm assuming you mean actual, true utopia. Cool.
Yeah.
My answer to that is that's kind of bad on the other end of the scale, because it makes as much sense as putting a blindfold on your face and hitting accelerate full speed on an 8-lane interstate. It's like, what? No, you have no idea what's ahead of you. Like on a foggy 8, like, no, that's also bad,
Yeah, and that's the thing, is we actually have, and I think, an increasing amount of those types of people that think that technology is the be all and end all. It's almost, and it's something that Patrick Deneen actually writes about in his book, where the one facet of liberalism is seeing humanity as separate from nature, where we can use technology to transcend nature and completely separate ourselves from it, and then to create utopia and to become gods ourselves. That's one of the implicit views within the very foundation of liberalism itself.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing, because I think one of that implicit views is that whole idea plays into the part that human beings are sort of these interchangeable widgets that you can, like, if we separate ourselves completely from nature, it means that we are the only determinants of how we turn out, and you can sort of make human beings as these interchangeable widgets. By the way, in terms of biosciences, in terms of primates, pound for pound, we're actually not that strong. We're actually pretty easy to kill.
Yeah.
Humans are pretty easy to kill. What makes us tops is our ability. People always talk about like the invention or discovery of fire and electricity as the greatest thing human beings did. Sure, top 3. I would say also writing and language, because that means we can learn lessons and we can preserve knowledge. Yeah. Across time, and we can communicate across time.
And yeah, before we continue, I want to just read a comment here from Years that I think is very good. I maintain the opinion that technology is neutral. It can be used for good or evil. You can build a house with stones or kill a man with stones. Same with nuclear energy and artificial intelligence.
I'd say that's one of the most fair comments. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then we've got a comment, a question here from Jay, who asks, can you talk about Kurzweil's singularity hypothesis?
Ray
I
Kurzweil.
can't, but maybe my guest can.
Ray Kurzweil. I mean, the question is, what about it? I think probably one of the when people bring that up, they generally want to know, is the technological singularity inevitable? And that is,
maybe you should start off. What is a technological singularity?
And the technological singularity is based on the preface that at some point we are going to reach a critical tipping point where our stuff is going to accelerate so fast and so much that that it creates, like you said, a Deus ex machina, God from the machine, and it's just going to take over, and it's just boom. That's it. That's humanity over in an eye blink. So there's a couple of things wrong with that, by the way. One of them is that it's predicated on Moore's law, which, by the way, shout out to Gordon Moore. I think he's been married to his wife about 70 years now. He's in his 90s. He's a great engineer. And one of his things is that of Moore's law was that it presupposed the ability to exponentially and indefinitely make smaller and smaller circuits and more and more and more. And the problem with that is that it also presupposes things like, he didn't take into account things like there's a certain limit. You can only make conductors so small and so together before you start running into certain bottlenecks, things like basic thermodynamics, or maybe you start making things so small that that you run into issues with things like quantum mechanics starting to take over in terms of physics. But even Moore's law itself, one of the bases of the singularity, has actually been revised over time. It's actually starting to taper off the rate at which we double processing power. And also the other issue with the singularity hypothesis is that it presupposes that that things like processing power is all that's required to enable the singularity. And that's not true. It also presupposes a certain type of logic by said superintelligence, which also doesn't hold true. Because, for example, let's say this intelligence starts being crafted. Well, we can assume that it probably has thoughts like us, in that it realizes that there are unknown unknowns. One of my heroes, Isaac Arthur, makes a really great example where the human who builds a cybernetic arm that can lift cars has essentially just killed himself because he forgot to shore up his spine into a cybernetic spine and his legs into cybernetic legs, and he'll get crushed because he just built a cybernetic arm. Similarly, a superintelligence would realize, oh, there's a bunch of unknown unknowns, and I'm probably going to mess up at some point. And so it's going to have to run into a lot of stumbling blocks like that. Moreover, it also presupposes that it's a sort of binary situation where it's just us versus them being the super intelligence, and that there are no players on the block. Albert Einstein was not the only smart person in his time, and he didn't even match the entire output of all of the people in his field in his lifetime, although his work influences us still. So there's, again, I'll play it one more time. There's a really great episode on the technological singularity, Is It Inevitable, by my hero Isaac Arthur. You should check it out. And to answer it, is there singularity possible? Yes. Is it inevitable? No.
Is it close?
Is it close? That's a debatable one. How close? Difficult to say. But I'm not. The one guarantee I can say is that it's not absolutely inevitable.
I see you just putting up some more comments here before we continue. Ruan van der Walt. Hey, your I don't know if he's
yeah. Oh, yeah. He's got time to hop on live streams, but he doesn't have time to make shows. How about that, Ruan? How about that, bro?
Ruan says utopia is subjective. Jay says techno-utopianism is deeply gnostic, hence inherently dangerous. Let's let's see here. Oh yeah, this that we got to this question. Jay says, "Do the people that rule us believe that its singularity is imminent?" I think a lot of people that are in positions of power have these very out there beliefs that are not rooted in reality. I think they're all very drunk on utopianism. It's like that old quote from Carl Jung that said, "All addictions are bad, whether that be alcohol, heroin, or idealism." And I think a lot of people in positions of power, specifically in very powerful positions, have just gotten drunk on these very bizarre theories on how the world works and how the future should be. And they are trying to pursue them and use their power to bring about that utopianism. But it's like trying to build a perfect car with imperfect parts. It's just not going to happen. And as they fail and as they continue to fail, they just get more aggressive and frustrated in their efforts.
Right. Yeah. So I'll give you two quick examples. And by the way, in terms of these sort of technocrats and bureaucrats and all that that have sort of evolved in our society now, for the first example, I can perceive, at least in some part, how they think, such that I was walking through the shopping center the other day, and I thought, geez, like all these people walking around are so inefficient. I bet I could write a program that has a bunch that you walk up to the counter, type all the things you want, and then the drones just go through the aisle super efficiently and bring back what you need. And that was a thought that occurred to me, and I sort of thought, and I caught myself in that thought, and I thought, wow, okay, that's probably what someone like Bill Gates thinks, that he genuinely thinks he's actually making the world better, like you think. So if I extrapolate that thought, I can understand. I don't think it's a good thing that they think like that, but if I extrapolate that little shopping market thought I had, I was like, okay, cool. I can sort of see, how you could, come drunk on power like that. As for also, like you said, the imperfect parts, a lot of us write code in what we would call high-level programming languages these days. Languages like C++, C#, Python, and all that. Those are all very high-level programming languages. And the compiler eventually, does all this magic and tokenization and all that and breaks it down to simple, sort of binary. Like eventually it gets down to sort of machine level code. Now, there are some people who can code in like assembler, and that's like crazy levels of masochism. But, everything we write nowadays in high level languages, what we call high level languages, where there's words, 4x with English words or whatever words, that's high level programming. But deep down, what it does, what your computer does, is that it breaks it down to basically machine code, no matter what you're coding in. And so to get to your point about the imperfect parts, if I was coding in machine code, I could possibly write a piece of programming that is infinitely more efficient in terms of like memory management and all that, and how big the program is, than I could in a higher level language. So I sort of get what you're saying in that. I think that I'm writing this, and I think I can make a perfect piece of code, and I think, oh, it'll work. It'll. Why can't this work? And the reason it can't work is because I don't get to see all the way down to the lowest level, machine level code type things, how this works out. If I did, then maybe I could, right? But it's just not feasible.
I mean, just look at some of his ideas. Like William Fentz wants to shoot dust into the air to stop global warming. I think that's the last big brain, mega mind idea I saw he was contemplating. I'm like, it's just, this is what happens when. So what you described there is you walking in the supermarket and you got that thought, and then you entertained it for a while, and then you went on with your life. But because you have better things to do and you've got things that distract you. But if you're like a trillionaire and you have this idea and you're just sitting there and there's no one around you, just sitting there alone in your mega mansion, you just entertain that thought, and you entertain that thought, you entertain that thought, and you just start thinking, well, maybe I can actually just throw money at it and actually make this thought real. And then I think a lot of these people get lulled into a sense that they can actually start making these little novel thoughts that they have into reality, and then that's where it gets dangerous.
Absolutely. There are no like checks and balances on their thought. It's kind of like, so I was a software engineer, I still am basically, but I was a software engineer for many, many years. And one of the things that's really prevalent, at least if you're working for a good company in software engineering, is what we call code inspection or code review, whereby basically somebody else in your team takes a look at the code you've written, and depending on the policies of where you of I think it's a living embodiment of the Latin saying "Quis custodet ipsos custodes," who guards the guardians, or who watches the watchers. And so basically, when you have a code review, it's basically usually somebody senior or a couple of other people at your level looking at your code and saying, oh, it could be better X over here, or, oh, this is garbage, don't do it at all, or, just fix it up here and there. And these people don't have anyone conducting code review on their ideals. So the bugs in their code, the code that should never exist in the first place, all that just goes through. They just get to check it through because there is no code review for these people. By the way, there are, like, in terms of global warming, there are within the next generation or so some really feasible, much better ways to handle global warming. I could name two off the top of my head now that wouldn't involve us all driving electric cars. And one of them involves, the future of what I see is the future of computing. So, yeah.
But there was something else. Now we're talking about the future. There was something else that we discussed on the No Script show, and that was actually this article on how advancements in artificial intelligence have created a lot of fears on increasing doubt in scientific research, because you can have pretty much evidence in scientific studies be faked by artificial intelligence. And then also we got into the topic of evidence being faked in court cases. I mean, we've already got deep fake technology that's pretty convincing. We've got AI that generates audio that's very convincing. And especially if it's small snippets and basic sentences, and you can make some people say some very damning stuff using artificial intelligence already. Specifically, I mean, the examples that we have now are very benign. It's just like these apps where you can have Johnny Depp say good morning to you, but that's still the same technology at play, just at a very basic level. And I can understand where that techno-pessimism comes from, where people see the increased doubt when it comes to evidence in court cases or scientific evidence through artificial intelligence fabricating these types of evidences and being used by malicious actors and by pretty much humanity, as we always try to find shortcuts and all the exploitations and ways to get ahead, even when it's immoral. That's the human nature. But what would your response be to that type of, I think, genuine and also not just genuine, also valid fear about the advancements in technology and specifically artificial intelligence for the future? What would your words or response be as someone that's a bit more optimistic, but also in that field of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I think this is the one where we discussed on Twitter. It's kind of like when, basic cheap quote unquote firearms wielded by peasants on medieval battlefields became capable of piercing through a knight's plate armor. We didn't give up the idea of wearing armor. We just changed the type of armor we started wearing. We started wearing Kevlar vests with plate inserts in them because that's the type of armor you use to counter that. So right now, I think you were actually referring to the one article we discussed on the show where they looked at certain measures as to detect that kind of fraudulency. So I don't have the bit. I don't have the actual bit signal of the bit signature of the entire image that it generated in front of me. But I would presuppose that just like armor concepts evolved, so do in fact, that in that article they talk about an algorithm that detects algorithmically generated images, because at the end of the day, algorithmically generated images follow a deterministic path as opposed to actual images, no matter how close they are. So I would say the thing is to be cautious, but to also realize that there are, just as we've created new armor for the new weapons, we will create new detection programs. In fact, if you go online now and Google, and if you Google something called quantum encryption, it's a new form of encryption that we're working on to counter the fact that with quantum quantum computing, you're now able to theoretically break some of the hardest encryption technologies we have, because, well, it's based on large prime number theory, and so quantum computing breaks that. So I would say, what you as a person could do, I would say probably petition your local governments and do what you can to put more pressure into researching sort of the equivalent of artificial for things like deepfakes. Invest more energy and finances into building artificial forensics, as it were, because it does form a certain deterministic path.
Yeah, so to really sum that up, as I understand it, just because better and better weapons are being developed doesn't mean that the better armor won't be developed and better defense strategies won't be developed. And yeah, I think that's a very good response in regards to those, I think, as I said, valid fears. Now,
absolutely valid. Yeah.
Now, seeing as we are in talking about your field of expertise, artificial intelligence, from what you can see around you and from your observations in the field, where are we currently in regards to computing power? Like, what, in layman's terms, what are computers able to accomplish today, and what is the future from what you can see?
Ooh, that's actually a very large question. Okay, so I think when a lot of people think of AI, they think of these super intelligences that do a lot of mathematics. I'll give you a lot of mathematics. I'll give you an example, right? The actual quest, or how I define artificial intelligence, textbook definition is, when something synthetic does something intelligent that we consider a biological intelligence. But a better example would be if you could see somebody who could calculate the first 50 digits of pi and add them up very quickly. Would you say that person is very intelligent? Yes.
Yes.
But so if you saw a computer do the same thing, would you call it particularly intelligent, the first 50 digits? Okay, so let's flip that around. If you could see a person walk around, look at objects, and pick them up and ask you, what is this? Would you say that person's doing something unusual or super intelligent?
No, he's doing something very basic.
Yeah. Now let's flip it around. If a machine did the same thing, would you say it's an intelligent machine?
Well, yes. I just think about those Boston Dynamics videos of the people just kicking the robot dog, and it's doing very basic stuff for a biological dog, but for a robot dog, it's very advanced.
Exactly. So based on that, the real definition of, and the real direction where artificial intelligence is, the real definition is the quest to figure out why machines are so damn stupid, because that machine walking around picking up things, what it's doing is that it's performing it's computer vision and object recognition. It's also performing inference. It's also performing natural language processing. Now, if you could box them all those things up into one machine, you would win the Nobel Prize for the next 10 years, 20 years in computing, because those are all very specific intelligences. So what I'm trying to say here is that the future, at least in terms of computing, is trying to learn to combine certain types of intelligence into one, because humans are actually smarter than machines, and will be for a long time, such that we have so many different types of intelligences, like natural language processing, object recognition. So when you see something like, I remember recently there was a paper, I think it was StarCraft 2, where they built an artificial intelligence which was able to go toe-to-toe with StarCraft. It was a Google DeepMind thing, where they built a machine that was able to go toe-to-toe with like top-class StarCraft 2 players, like actual strategy game players. And I won't go into the mathematics of how they actually did it, but it was quite cool. At least it was entertaining to me. And they used the same lessons they learned from that to do various Monte Carlo chain tree searches, which they use that to work with a lot of biochemistry, because the same technology that searches big search spaces for StarCraft is useful in a lot of biochemistry stuff. And people are like, wow, this thing beat these StarCraft players. Yeah, okay, cool. Now talk to it. You can't. It doesn't have that intelligence.
Ask
So
it
that
to tell you a joke and to
yeah,
explain why it's funny.
it's in my paper. You saw it. So
Mm,
I would say the search right now is to try to combine a lot of intelligences into one, because a machine can do one thing. I would caution people to be like, cool, yes, that's very advanced, but it's what we call very narrow intelligence. It's not the broad intelligence we have. In terms of processing power, and this is where I actually wanted to segue into it. So one of the big things is I would say putting server farms in space for two reasons. Partially because in space the sun is always shining, so solar power becomes a really great option there. Partially because environmentally it's just less of an impact having our server farms in space. Like, you can vent all the waste heat you want out into space. Nobody cares. There's no consequences. Zero, zip. Um, but partially also because, aside from the environmental impact, there is a concept in computer science known as Landau limits. And Landau limits are basically the scientific principle on which liquid cooling is based. It's remember that time when everyone had gaming computers? It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to cool my computer down and overclock it like really, really high. Well, that's the same thing that Landau limits are extracted from. Is that what happens in computer science and physics is that at a lower temperature, you are able to extend less energy to do a single computation. And so Landau limits are a form of mathematical calculation that will tell you this is the absolute most sort of computation you can get out of this with this amount of energy. So with like really high Landau limits, you could get like super computing levels of computation. This is like billions of years in the universe's future when it's a lot cooler. You could get super levels of computing on essentially the same energy that you run a light bulb. And so the reason I think that's the future is that we can at least take advantage of cooler operating environments in space by putting our server farms in space. The environmentalists will be happy, takes less energy. It's a win for everyone.
You've got a question here from Dagbreker. Hello Dagbreker, ek hoop dit gaan goed. Dankie dat jy ingeskakel het. He says, how's it? Has Wotan watched the Alphago documentary? It's an extremely creepy but cool.
Extremely creepy. Hold on, let me crack my shout out to Yingling, America's Alpha Star. That's what that StarCraft thing is. It's probably based on AlphaGo, which is an algorithm that they use to beat or to compete in the Japanese game of Go, which is like, I think it's like a form of weird hybrid chess checkers thing. But I think I know what he's referring to in that AlphaGo.
Yeah. So here's the description of the documentary. It came out in 2017, and the description is a journey from the halls of Cambridge to Seoul, where a legendary Go master faces an unproven AI challenger.
Yeah. So yeah, that same AlphaGo algorithm is what they made Alpha Star from, which was what competed with the StarCraft players. So I'm assuming the extremely creepy part he's referring to is that a machine could do that. But I would say again, remember, all it's doing is that it's searching a very large search space with a finite number of possible states. It doesn't know the idea of, say, setting up a military ambush or shutting down. Like, those are all different types of intelligences.
Yeah, now that you mention it, there's a very good documentary by Frederick Knudsen on YouTube. Down the Rabbit Hole is his series' name, on Deep Blue, the computer that beat the world chess champion all the way back. And there was a interesting part in that documentary where they said one of the biggest challenges the Deep Blue team had was to have the AI understand the idea of a sacrifice, where you get on top, you end up on top at the end, but you have to take a cost in the present for that to happen, and it was a major stumbling block for them.
Yeah. So basically, what that, if I had to extract that, because it's looking for a global, what you want is the global maximum. The global maximum is the win state, right? And the thing is, to get to the global maximum, it's sort of like if you wrote an algorithm to sort of climb hills or mountains. It might get to a part where it gets to the top of a mini hill and takes a dip, and it's going to stop that path and go back and find another path, even if that original path that it was on is actually the most efficient path. In the same idea, a local minimum is the, I guess, functional equivalent of a sacrifice, of a short-term sacrifice, because you are taking that dip because overall the actual path you're taking is the best path. And so there are a lot of algorithms out there that actually do get stuck. It's a type of sort of reasoning. It's a type of very, how do I put it, predictive reasoning that there are a lot of types of algorithms out there that do, like you say, fail when it comes to dealing with local minimums, which is something humans are actually very good at, because what we do is we imagine the entire outcome. What you're doing when you think about something, you're running a simulation in your head, is that you're looking about the total
And when you're overthinking, you're running too many simulations in your head.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's the thing. Let's say, seeing as it seems many in the live chat rightly or wrongly believe we are heading into the techno apocalypse in regards to AI and the T800 coming for everything that humanity holds dear. You being on the inside, looking at what's going on behind the scenes, behind the curtain of artificial intelligence, give us some ideas that might help humanity in this future humanity versus robots or artificial intelligence war. What are computers very bad at, and what are humans very good at? Let's start with that in regards to this hypothetical situation.
Okay. First of all, let's say we are at war against machines. I'm going to assume you mean like war just on planet Earth. Like it's not
right. Yeah. No, it's contained on our planet.
Again, I don't know why an AI would want to go to war with us. It breaks certain logical conventions. But let's, for the hypothetical, things that we're very good at is that we are, all of us, very good at, like I just said, running simulations in our head. Whatever the upper intelligence of this thing is, its drones don't run simulations. But even the most average person,
you're talking about like deeply dynamic simulations that are taking in a myriad of facts that might change on a dime as the situation changes.
Precisely. Whereas even like the most average person like can run simulations in their head, whereas machines, little drones, it probably won't be that good at it's going to specialize itself a little bit too much. The other thing is that right now, the atmosphere of the Earth is actually, one of our best things is the environment, because the atmosphere of the Earth isn't actually that great for machines. Like the air that we breathe is very oxidizing for machines. It's not the greatest. Like if I were a machine, what I would like to do is drain the atmospheric layer around the Earth and replace it all with something inert like nitrogen, so that my machine parts don't react that much. And the other thing is that we're much more adept at, we have a larger number of sensors in us, and that we reproduce that number of sensors from the energy that we take in. Whereas, that is to say, I eat food and you eat food, and when we reproduce that energy we take in, we can form new versions of ourselves. Whereas the machines, the energy they take in is the energy they use to run themselves and to produce new ones of themselves. Every single person can make a whole nother person with another person. Every man and woman can make another person. Not every machine has all the schematics to make another machine. And so that's something that's like, its ability to reproduce is very, very, very limited. And the other thing is that as stochastic as difficult to sort of this black box AI seems, humans ourselves, our great strength is our unpredictability. Like we can on the dime, like that story of what's his name, Stanislav something or other, the Russian dude who basically averted World War III by saying, you know what, despite all my instructions that I should launch these nukes, I think that this is a bug. I just have this gut instinct that this is a bug, and thank God he did, because it was just like sunlight or something reflecting off of the clouds that triggered the Soviet satellites. Machines can't do that. They will follow instructions to the letter.
They would have launched the nuclear weapons.
Yeah. So so our best bet to win is to take advantage of our unpredictability.
Right. And then, Odin, I also wanted to know, as we approach the end of the episode, artificial intelligence in the future. Will artificial intelligence, if it gets advanced enough, be based?
So
is there a threat that it becomes cringe and left wing?
I mean, I know the answer you want, but I'll give you the honest answer. First, that presumes the concept of based, as we understand it now, remains as is. Right? Let's assume that it does. I would say some artificial intelligences will be based, others not so much. That's one of the biggest flaws a lot of people have when they think about AIs, is that they think, again, in this binary, there will be one unique super AI over the world or over the worlds, and that's it. And that doesn't track for me at all. It's incredibly likely that we will live in a world of AIs like Einstein, where, you know, there would be Einstein, Marie Curie, Niels Bohr, all these AIs alive at the same time, and they will be competing with each other. Remember, even with a super AI or with a great explorer, it's the first person exploring that field in its class, but it's not the only in its class. There's probably a lot of predecessors, and so it is much more useful to think of future AIs in sort of these smart things, but there's a class of them. And so, to answer your question, yes, some of them will be, in the concept as we understand now, based, but others will be cringe.
All right. Well, Odin, we've reached almost the end, and I want to get to one more question, and then we're going to get to final thoughts. And that last question, I think, is to wrap it all up in regards to what we've been talking about here tonight, in regards to techno-pessimism and techno-optimism. And that is, if you look at the trends today, if you look at what's being done in your field of artificial intelligence today, and you look at what is being advanced, where we are focusing our resources, do you think we are on the right track in regards to a future where technology advances, but we are tempering it with our morality and we're tempering it with our good judgment? Or are you worried about certain threats becoming more prominent in regards to this path that we're walking with technology becoming derailed?
I would say a tentative yes, because a lot of people, okay, I'll extract it again. Quick question. Like, anyone in the chat, or you can answer this. Like, how much roughly, when you think of the average First World War soldier, how much time roughly, percentage, do you think they spent going over the top and charging at machine guns?
Very small, very, very small.
Good. Yeah, that's also looked at. It's actually a very small percentage of the time. But what are the pictures we see? It's just dead people and people going over the top, because that's what wants to be focused on. In the same token, I know that there's a lot of scary things about AI that people want to focus on, but they're focusing a disproportionate amount of attention on that because that's what sells headlines. Another reason I feel optimistic is because we now have fields like explainable AI and machine ethics. So explainable AI is a great thing, in which it's a field of technology, which XAI, in which, like the name suggests, we're trying to build techniques in which we are able to at least come to understandings as to how the machine came to this decision, or how it came to this. And it's based on basic principles such as prediction accuracy, traceability of calculations, and user or decision understanding, which is like the user dashboard. So things like prediction accuracy are things that focus on techniques like Lime, which helps us understand how accurate that prediction is. Traceability, again, looking at things like how these layers connect and how this calculation is going through, and then decision understanding. So on the dashboard, for example, of an AI's output, you could see, for example, let's say there was a great IBM video actually they made where, let's say you have an AI that's detecting, is this purchase fraudulent, and it says, for example, this $100 coffee purchase is fraudulent, then it'll tell you on the dashboard based on the price. It's, by the way, if you're paying $100 for a coffee, I know inflation's out of hand, right? But if you're paying $100 for coffee, like seriously, and it'll tell you on the dashboard how, like the user understanding component, how it came to that. The fact that a lot of people are going into fields like explainable AI and machine ethics, which help, as the name suggests, come to a more ethical sort of machine computing, which, by the way, I say take with a grain of salt, because a lot of the problems in machine ethics are just problems in philosophy that we haven't solved yet, and so they just get passed down or inherited into AI because our own way of thinking hasn't solved those ethical problems yet. But yeah, so explainable AI is really big these days in machine ethics, and I'm really, really excited about them. And because like inside looking out, I know that much energy is going into them. I feel that we're on the right path in terms of artificial intelligence.
All right, Odin, before we say goodbye, I'd like to give you the opportunity now to, and this is a question that's become almost like a question of the show. It's almost like a question that I've started asking all my guests, and that is to, if you have any thoughts or an idea that you want to leave the audience with this week, something to keep at the back of their mind, to chew on a little bit. It can be a rhetorical question. It can be some ideas or a thought experiment. It can be just a free-flowing stream of consciousness idea. What would you leave them with for this week, just to keep at the back of their minds and maybe think about a little bit?
Does it have to be like technical or AI related?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be. It can be anything.
Well, there's a lot of conflict in the world right now. So I guess my parting, as a comic book geek, my parting thought would be the Oath of the Blue Lantern Corps of Hope, which would be, in fearful day, in raging night, when all seems lost in the in fearful day, in raging night, with strong hearts full our souls ignite, when all seems lost in the war of light, look to the stars, for hope burns bright.
Well, that's a very nice white pill to end the episode on. I see a lot of people enjoyed it. Yes, says great stream. Thank you, Adams and Wotan. Sideliner Opinion says thank you, Wotan and Adams, for making this very inhumane topic digestible. Hendo says 28 likes. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Hendo, for your reminders in the chats of that like counter. The Freighter Watcher says at Wotan and Conscious Caracal, very interesting conversation today. Thank you both for the thought-provoking discussion. Well, thank you very much, guys. And just before we say goodbye, I'd also just want to, seeing as we are saying thank you, I also want to say thank you to the sponsor of today's episode. Once again, Bitvice, the only place in South Africa that sells Bitcoin directly to your self-custody, meaning that unlike traditional Bitcoin exchanges, you don't have to trust anyone to hold your Bitcoin for you. And this removes the largest risk associated with Bitcoin. If you're interested in learning about Bitcoin, you can also check out the podcast called By the Horns. It's available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. Very interesting, goes specifically into the matter of crypto and Bitcoin. I regularly tune in, and I also find it very interesting. They've actually taught me a lot about a field that I knew nothing about, and I just find it interesting. So you can go check that out. And also there's a link in the description to their website. If you have any questions about crypto or Bitcoin, they're very quick to help you out. And if you're already into crypto and their business sounds interesting to you or something that you might be interested in, also go check out that link and get in contact with them. So yeah, once again, thank you very much to Bitvice for the sponsorship. Then I also just want to thank everyone that tuned in, everyone in the chat, and everyone that has put in their nice comments and all their interesting questions in the chat. Thank you very much. You really add to the content and you make it so much better, because that's the thing. Sometimes, as I've told many of my guests, sometimes I get distracted by the chat and I don't even I sometimes forget to pay attention to what's being said on the stream. But yeah, thank you very much to all your cool questions and comments. It's really it helps out the show. And then if you're new here and you like these types of conversations, you can leave a like, you can subscribe, and if you're watching and it's not live anymore, you can also leave a comment in the comment section. I read all of them and respond to as many as possible. So cheers, guys. Have a good one, and God bless.